We've talked a lot about Doctor Who eras on this channel, so now I think it's best to look at my favourite 50 stories from Doctor Who's long history. I will be combining both classic and new series in this video, and goes without saying, of course, this is all just opinion based. If you like or dislike any of these stories, that's great. And if you think some stories are too low, just remember I love all of the 50 stories that I have named on this list, so keep the comments civil before we get any "how could you possibly put X higher above Y?" With all that out the way, here is the most positive video you'll find on Doctor Who on YouTube these days, starting with number 50, The Aztecs. One of my all-time favourite historical stories, The Aztecs gives an impression of space and exquisite set design despite its studio-bound setting, and is packed with so much detail. It really was a journey that the regular cast went on together in the first season, and the chemistry between them is just unmistakable now. An unspoken softness and affection for each other. The lavish costumes and props are another superb visual element. They just really went all out in those first season historicals to ensure that they looked as authentic as possible. Powerful drama arises from the dilemma of interfering with history, and it highlights both Barbara and the Doctor at their best. The Aztecs themselves are a fascinating culture to explore. Sacrifices, arranged marriages, engagement rituals, philosophy, the reverence of the perfect victims. It might only be a snapshot of this period of history, but it certainly is an engaging one. Platoxel is an excellent villain. He's creepy, he's theatrical, he's both sinister and entertaining at the same time, and exploiting Barbara and her friends' weaknesses. From start to finish, this is Jacqueline Hill's finest serial as Barbara, because it gives her so much to work with, but the truth is she always approached the role with this much conviction anyway. She's a fantastic actress, and is given material that can really stretch her and give the character a new direction to explore. William Hartnell is on fine form too, indulging in a witty romance but proving startlingly vicious when he needs to be, warning Barbara not to interfere with history. The Aztecs is one of the finest stories of the 60s, that is one of the series' most accomplished dramas, and just to think, we're only at number 50 on this list. Number 49, Kinder. Kinder has a lot of plot elements that we've seen before in Doctor Who. Misguided researchers, arrogantly led colonists, misunderstood indigenous cultures, intrusive technology, mental health issues, possession and corruption. They all have a rich history within the show. But where Kinder stands out for me is by bringing all those elements together in such a fresh, unique way, exploring the emotional and even the spiritual impact of them on various characters. Kinder is also an ambitious story, attempting to create a lush jungle, an otherworldly void, and a giant snake all in a tiny 80s studio. The void and its inhabitants are a visual success. The jungle and the snake may not be great, and many viewers find this a visual weakness, and certainly I do, but it can be understandable. Seeing the studio through the jungle floor or watching the giant snake wobble around can take you out of this story, but if you get past these budgetary and visual limitations, there's so much to admire in Kinder. The direction and performances are both excellent, the scenes in the void are genuinely unsettling, the strain on the colonists' mental health is palpable, and the impact of possession on its victims is grimly realistic. This is not a story where people shrug off possession and just move on. The examination of the indigenous culture is one of the best in classic Doctor Who. There are multiple antagonists requiring different handling, and the story structure does well in building to the climax and making the stakes seem really high. Particular praise goes to Janet Fielding, Neris Hughes and Mary Morris, who carry the emotional core of this story, as well as Peter Davison, who delivers one of his finest performances as the Doctor. Simon Roos and Richard Todd portray two sides of a mental health crisis without going over the top. Kinder is just a experimental, wonderful story that I really enjoy, despite its limitations. Number 48, Demons of the Punjab. Just from watching this historical, you can tell this is such a personal story from writer Vinay Patel that he was itching to tell and realise on the screen. The visual of a country being torn apart violently is a powerful and great setting for a drama. Now, Doctor Who could never hope to capture the scale of this conflict just within 45 minutes, and so focusing instead on just a single family that's torn apart by these events was an inspired idea. It allows us to get to intimately close to this historical setting without ever really seeing it, but in a good way. And because Vinay Patel is an expert at getting us to care for his characters, it means we're devastated as something as pure as the faith that each individual has in this story is tearing them all apart. It also leaves room for the regulars to have some beautiful moments with the guest characters. Graham talking about why he loves travelling with the Doctor, the hen and stag party, and the wedding itself, which emotionally is an unusually multifaceted sequence for the series. Jodie Whittaker is on fire as the Doctor at this point, still enjoying playing her as part of an ensemble, but getting some very strong dominant moments. I particularly loved her threats to the Fajarians and how she confronted Manish at the climax. She's a contradiction of knowledge, vulnerability and governance all combined excellently. Conflict isn't as simple as Pakistan is being created for Muslims, Hindus have India. It's essentially what is happening, and it's extremely worthy to teach both kids, who probably have heard little about this subject in school, and adults who have shied away from a very apologetic page of the past. It's a valuable lesson about dividing land, faith, and people. It's an unfortunate chapter of human history, one where the demons present were the people and how they behaved. Religious intolerance was exacerbated and led to widespread slaughter, and in today's troubled times it's a period of history we should look back on and try to learn something from. For being such an intimate character piece, Demons of the Punjab rightly deserves a place in my top 50 stories, for being such a personal love letter to history. Number 47, The 11th Hour. By far the best debut story we've had for a new Doctor, The 11th Hour oozes confidence with every frame. Following the most popular Doctor of the new era was a Herculean task, and yet, even within his first moments, Matt Smith proves that he is the Doctor. His performance is weird, charming, fun, and just manic throughout, but when he has to show a quiet anger, he absolutely nails it. Even from the jump, and with how perfectly young he looks in his first episode, he just nails the idea of an old man with a young face. So many understated expressions interweave between a very hammy and jumpy performance. The pacing is also perfect, the script just feels so tightly written with not a scene wasted, and it also manages to balance the different tones perfectly, from the fairy tale feel of the young Amy scenes to the more horror-themed of Prisoner Zero. These are all balanced perfectly, and the episode still feels cohesive despite these differing tones. The 11th Hour is such a strong start to both the Smith and Moffat era of the show, and it's one of the finest post-regeneration stories ever produced in my opinion. Number 46. Ghostlight. By far the most complicated Doctor Who story ever made, but the one that easily rewards repeat viewings. Doctor Who has often explored some very intellectual ideas, be they scientific or historical, in a very fun way, and this is a real quirky way of exploring the theories of evolution. Touches such as Josiah Smith suggesting that Gwendolyn has undergone a metamorphosis because she has changed into gents' clothes is very creative. There's intelligent, creepy conversations around a Victorian dining table that's not what you come to expect from an action-adventure show like Doctor Who, but it just makes it all the more welcome. Reverend Matthews dismissing the theory that we've evolved from apes and then being transformed into one himself is just a hideous parody of one of the sickest jokes ever played on a Doctor Who character. It's very dark, funny, and brilliant at the same time. And then you have the angelic light, having something of a nervous breakdown because he is trying to catalogue a planet that is constantly changing and evolving. At its heart, Ghostlight is a story of evolution, both literal and metaphorical, as the inhabitants of Gabriel Chase grapple with the inexorable march of progress and the ever-shifting sands of identity, from Control's metamorphosis from a primitive creature to a refined lady, to Light's existential crisis over the fate of the Earth. The episode delves deep into the complexities of life itself, probing the very nature of existence with a keen eye and a profound sense of insight. With its intricate plot, compelling characters, and profound thematic depth, it is a tour de force of television drama that transcends genre conventions to deliver an unforgettable viewing experience. Number 45. Dalek. If you want to name an episode that does everything so very, very right, I would point to Rob Sherman's Dalek. Dalek is a standout story in the Ninth Doctor's only season, managing to make the Dalek terrifying in its relentless power. It had the unenviable task of bringing the concept of the Daleks into the 21st century. This had to be a Dalek story just for everyone, and not just for fans of the classic series. It had to make us understand why the Doctor might fear a Dalek where we hadn't seen him fear other opponents before. It It had to shake off any lingering skepticism about their look and effectiveness in the broader public consciousness, and it had to deliver an emotional punch that would elevate it beyond just being monsters versus people, and succeeds on every level. The Doctor and Rose's different reactions to the Daleks when they encounter it are brilliantly played, with Christopher Eccleston and Billie Piper both giving us believable performances that make the episode feel so real. The decisions they make from then on, the conclusions they come to, the way everything plays out, it's a powerful story and unmatched before or since in making a Dalek seem like a living creature. It also shows us the Doctor's trauma and just how much healing he needs at this point in his life. Christopher Eccleston has some standout scenes where he voices the Doctor's trauma, and Billie Piper does an excellent job of showing just how much Rose has changed, with soft shifts in tone of voice and body language as she realises what this Dalek wants. Dalek remains one of the strongest stories in the revived era. At almost every level it succeeds in what it sets out to do. It's the episode that grabbed doubtful audience members and convinced them that Doctor Who and its greatest enemies can work in the 21st century. Number 44. The Curse of Fenric. This story delivers a tour de force of suspense, intrigue and high-stakes drama that ranks amongst the series' finest achievements. Set against the backdrop of World War II, the episode plunges viewers into a world of secrets, betrayal, and ancient evils lurking beneath the surface. But it all comes from the emergence of Fenric, an evil since the dawn of time, that elevates this episode to dizzying heights of brilliance. Trapped for centuries within a Chinese flask and now unleashed upon an unsuspecting world, Fenric's machinations cast a shadow of fear and uncertainty over the proceedings, as the Doctor and his companions race against time to thwart its nefarious plans. The introduction of the Haemovores, grotesque vampire creatures born from the ravages of a polluted future Earth, adds such a layer of chilling horror to the narrative, as the base and its inhabitants are besieged by the monstrous creatures. With their origins shrouded in mystery and their motives unclear, the Haemovores serve as a potent symbol of the darkness that lurks within us all. The Curse of Fenric culminates in an ending of breathtaking emotional resonance and narrative complexity, cementing its status as one of Doctor Who's most unforgettable episodes. As the climax unfolds, the tension reaches a fever pitch, drawing viewers inexorably towards a conclusion that is as satisfying as it is surprising. At the heart of the ending lies a profound moment of revelation and redemption, as the Doctor and Ace confront their own inner demons and grapple with the consequences of their action. The revelation that Ace's future is intrinsically linked to these events unfolding around her adds a poignant layer of emotional depth to the narrative, as she comes face to face with the legacy of her own past. But it is the Doctor's final gambit that truly steals the show, as he orchestrates a daring plan to turn the ancient Haemovore against Fenric and thwart its evil schemes. In a moment of selfless heroism, the Doctor sacrifices his own safety to save the day, proving once again that he is willing to go to any lengths to protect the universe from the forces of darkness. The Curse of Fenric is a triumph of production design and direction, with its evocative setting and atmospheric lighting immersing viewers in a world teetering on the brink of chaos. Number 43. The Silurians. Only 2 stories into this new Earthbound formula, and writer Malcolm Hulke is proving that there's much more than mad scientist or alien invasion to this format. The Silurians are an excellently conceived race, and their origins open up a huge moral quandary which has no easy answer. Who is to say they don't have a right to reclaim the planet that has become overwhelmed with human beings, since they have slept beneath the surface? Malcolm Hulke always characterises his stories to the hilt, but he has surpassed his best efforts elsewhere with this very memorable guest cast. Every one of these characters comes alive in unexpected ways, and the director has cast them all perfectly. The performances add much weight to the already substantially characterised parts. These feel like real people, not just ciphers out to service the plot. The regulars all shine too, with John Pertwee, Caroline John, and Nicholas Courtney all given plenty to do, and treating the drama with appropriate seriousness. At 7 episodes, you would think that the story would outstay its welcome, but there is enough drama and surprises to see you through to the last second, and you can easily get through this in one go. The ending is justly hailed as one of the show's best, and it shows that the Doctor's new military allies might not be as trustworthy as we all thought. For positively revelling in the new Earthbound formula, The Silurian stands as one of the best stories of the John Pertwee era. Number 42. Survival. What a way to end the classic series on. Survival really encapsulates everything that Doctor Who was doing right in the late 1980s, and really showcases the potential for stories that still exist with this leading pair, and the behind-the-scenes duo of John Nathan Turner producing and Andrew Cartmel script editing. At the same time, this story has some of the richest theming of the classic era, much of which unintentionally fits remarkably well with this story as a finale to 26 seasons of adventures. The story leans heavily into the themes of survival of the fittest and the laws of the jungle. These themes reflect very well to Doctor Who's own struggle to staying afloat with new BBC management and its fight to stay on the air. These themes also act as a vessel for Ace, as the script really examines what makes her as strong as she is, and whether that's all fueled by primal desires for a free and barbaric hunt. Sophie Aldred is superb here, juggling between playing an Ace that wants to give in to these primal urges and live life her own way, and an Ace who's willing to be more in tune with her own emotions and wants to keep travelling with the Doctor. The Doctor does a wonderful job of keeping Ace grounded and on the right path back to him. Sylvester McCoy and Sophie Aldred's chemistry as a pair has never been better, and we're given a terrifying version of the Master, with Anthony Ainley giving a superb performance. For ending the classic series on such a high, Survival easily stands as my favourite story from season 26. Number 41, The Invasion. One of the most confident Doctor Who stories ever made, and definitely proved that the series would have a future into the 1970s. The Cybermen have never been portrayed as more powerful here, as they effortlessly take down armies in spectacular battles, and show that emotions are their weakness as they are driven insane when emotions are fed into them. Tobias Vaughan is equally power mad, but everything is contained and he's quietly menacing when he needs to. Silky smooth threatening gestures and stillnesses are found throughout this story. He's the sort of villain that is amused when two young girls stray into his lair and destroy his equipment, and issues his threat as an amusing joke to himself. Tobias Vaughan only loses his temper when he thinks that control is slipping away from him, but otherwise he has a look of content smugness locked on his face when he's addressing people. All this violent malarkey is a bit beneath him, so he merely issues the threat of violence to his personal pack animal Packer to get his hands dirty for him. The relationship between him and the Cybermen is a tenuous one at best. They know he will betray them once the invasion is completed, and he knows that they will betray him. The fun is just waiting to see who is going to make the first move. Like a good Bond villain, he gets to survey the capital and declare that soon it will all be his. Then there is the top-notch team of the second Doctor, Jamie and Zoe, who all get stellar moments and have developed a supremely watchable chemistry by this point. Unit is an idea that could have bombed spectacularly, but given the resources of this blockbuster script, they managed to pull it off with real style, and Nicholas Courtney's Brigadier is the perfect face to be the front of this military outfit. Brilliant guest characters like Isabel, Jimmy, Packer and Professor Watkins add a human dimension to the story that is vital, and the 8-episode length of the tale allows the actors to explore the roles. The Invasion is a story that deliberately takes its time to build up tension, and when the big event finally comes, you have some of the most exciting moments of the entire era, and easily one of the finest second Doctor stories. Number 40, Earthshock. The first classic serial I ever watched, and it's still one of my favourites. The Cybermen feel like a genuinely unstoppable force as they murder their way through the crew in this serial. If there is one thing the show always manages to get right about these creatures, it's their numbers and their relentless advance. The siege on the bridge is an example of how clever editing can make a scene far more tense than it otherwise would be, with cuts to the Cybermen at each door and the Doctor's ominous reaction. It is one memorable set piece after another in Earthshock. The Cybermen marching down the corridor and the guard trapped within the door are both images that linger in your mind. It's one of the most dynamically directed classic Doctor Who serials, with all the production crew working to make Earthshock as exciting and as atmospheric as possible. It's a remarkably confident production with a terrific look. Both the caves and the freighter are realistic, shadowy locations, and everything from the costumes to the hardware add to the sense of reality that director Peter Grimwade is determined to push. The Cybermen make an impressive return to the series. Their appearances give an excellent build-up in an unforgettably tense first episode, and their strength of numbers and insanely ambitious plans are more impressive than ever. Peter Davison gives the most assured performance of his first season, and the regulars do get moments to shine here. Earthshock takes risks and not only pulls off one, but two earth-shattering shocks, and it still makes them work, both times around. Easily one of the best Fifth Doctor stories ever made. Number 39, The Power of the Daleks. One of the most vital stories of the entire era, this story had to prove you could change the lead actor and have this be the same show. And what's interesting is how much the Daleks have become embedded in the public psyche at this point, because all it takes for the Doctor to defeat them, and for the audience at large to embrace and accept that this is the same man they saw merely one serial ago. If you were going to kickstart the show and give it a new lease of life with a new lead actor, then you couldn't do much better than handing him a story as gripping as this one to prove what they're capable of as an actor. The Power of the Daleks is a masterpiece of character drama and suspense building from writer David Whittaker. He takes Terry Nation's Dalek creations and he breathes new life into them. No longer are they just an army of killers, but instead they're formidable tacticians and psychological manipulators that prey on the weaknesses of the colony until they have enough strength to burst from the capsule and exterminate the whole lot of them. Less is somehow more here, and relying on their intelligence rather than their usual habit of strength, in numbers and kill first, think later, it's a far more effective expression of their ruthlessness. By the end of the story, there is an argument to be made that the colonists brought this on themselves, important figures all planning to utilise the Daleks in their own ways, and having their wishes granted, but it completely fall down upon themselves. You can't make a bargain with the Daleks because they will always demand payment, and there is only one reward they seek, which is total extermination. The way the story is structured, with each episode raising the stakes, is superb. They are broken into service, gather resources, kickstart their own production line, and build up an impressive fighting force and finally break free of the capsule, and set off to massacre the people that have made their resurrection possible. The Daleks hold their fire for 5 episodes, so when they are finally let off the leash, they are relentless. The tension grips from episode 1, it builds exceptionally well, and ends in an unforgettable bloodbath in episode 6. This is all a powerful backdrop for the new Doctor to establish himself against. Patrick Troughton emerging from this as an impish, awkward, intelligent, and modest version of the hero we have adjusted to. He gets some time alone with Polly and Ben, and they both get the chance to evaluate the man and arrive at the same decision come the ending of it all. This is still the Doctor, but an exciting, fresh version of the man. Memorable guest performances abound, the direction is top-notch, and as an opening to a new era, the bar has been set impossibly high. Number 38. The Massacre. It's no secret that I have a huge passion for historical adventures, and even though this is the most missing story ever, with not a single frame of transmission footage even surviving, or any telesnaps, The Massacre still holds a special place in my heart. Putting companion Stephen in a religious turmoil he has no knowledge of is terrific, and Peter Purves steals every scene he is in. You really feel for Stephen Taylor in regards to the difficult situation he has found himself in by being alone in such a religious turbulent period. He may be a space traveller from the future, but this is where he really comes into his own as an audience identification figure. He has nobody to rely on but himself and Anne Chaplet, who, despite having a companion-like role for this story, she isn't from Stephen's time, and he probably wouldn't be able to confide in her quite as much as he did with, say, Vicky in The Mythmakers, the previous historical that they both shared. Even his friendship with Nicholas is strained over the course of this story, as Stephen's assumption that the Abbot of Amboise is the Doctor in disguise causes distrust. But it's not unreasonable for Stephen to think that this is the Doctor. Without knowing where he really is and having little knowledge of 16th century France's history, he has no idea what machinations he's barreled himself into. And whilst the Doctor doesn't do much in this story, we pretty much get the first instance of the Time Lord victorious the 10th Doctor once embraced in the epilogue in this story. The Doctor has yet to let history take its course and allow thousands of Huguenots be massacred, as he sees history as a force of nature that can't be tampered with, and shouldn't be. Is this conceited? Most definitely, but it solely reminds the viewers that the Doctor is an alien whose moral code is very different to ours. The Massacre may be completely missing, but I'm hoping with what I've described to you gives you the inkling to check out the reconstructions or the narrated soundtrack. A truly underrated historical gem. Number 37. The Haunting of Villa Diodati. By far my favourite 13th Doctor story, Maxine Alderton, in a stunning debut script, ensures that she's faithful to history and also makes the history great fun to watch. They are paired off very well with the companions, who each get moments to shine as they are spooked out. I like how the story sets out to promise a haunted house mystery, and early scenes of the Doctor and friends exploring allow the clichés to be done extremely well before the whole piece turns on its head as the Cyberman appears and becomes both an influence on Shelley's Frankenstein and a kickstart into the Series 12 finale as well. The story plummets into an all-out horror for the finale, and we're introduced to the best Cybermen I can ever remember seeing in the series. This is the equivalent of the Metaltron Dalek from the Series 1 episode Dalek, half-formed, revelling in its own body horror, and relentlessly on a mission to save his own race. It's a scary brute, and it's out to complete its mission whatever the cost. The Haunting of Villa Diodati takes its own approach. It's a partially converted Cyberman who still has half of his face showing, and can still emote, but with mostly hatred, and is a remnant of a species that has all been wiped out. It's here to find the Cyberium that has been hidden away in human history, all the knowledge of cyber technology and development to help them start again. It's not only a great premise for the rest of the series, but it's a brilliant character drama in its own right. Grisly and half-formed, he's a fine instigator of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein's monster. The Haunting of Villa Diodati kept me on the edge of my seat throughout. Thanks to the peerless direction, the twists, turns, and the character interplay, it easily stands as my favourite 13th Doctor story. Number 36. The Web of Fear. I thank Rassilon and Omega every day that we are so lucky to have this story returned and able to enjoy once again. The Web of Fear certainly lives up to its reputation. This story is an absolute masterclass in atmosphere, helped by having the superb Douglas Camfield on directing duties. The scene in Silverstein's mansion where the redesigned, much more threatening Yeti are introduced is a perfect example of the gothic horror elements present throughout this story. The set design is also fantastic. The realism of the London Underground sets led to London Transport accusing the crew of sneaking in and filming in the actual Underground without their permission. The tension is also a highlight, with the trust between the characters being put to the test, with the possibility of conspirators working for the Great Intelligence. Nicholas Courtney is instantly fantastic, and he gets some really great moments. Seeing him actually believe the Doctor when he talks about the TARDIS is a real highlight, and unlike most authority figures we get in Doctor Who, the Brigadier is instantly understanding of the situation and is willing to go along with these extraordinary events, which makes for a nice change of pace and really sells his intelligence and tactical thinking. We do also get to see a more human side of him. Seeing how shaken he is by the loss of his men is great, and you can tell how much the loss of life hurts him. The plot, action, and performances all work really well together in this one story to convey tension and claustrophobia. I understand how this one scared a lot of kids back in the day when it aired. There's an air of desperation, and at times it's quite hard to see how the soldiers, the Doctor, and the civilian companions will get out of the tunnels alive. It's wonderfully tense from start to finish. The Web of Fear is a marvellous slice of 60s Doctor Who. Number 35. Listen. An excellent depiction of fear. I find the reputation Listen has amongst fans really fascinating. Some find it pretentious waffle, and others find it bafflingly thrilling. You can place me in the latter category. Listen deliberately asks more questions than it answers, which is bound to cause a portion of the Doctor Who fanbase, but I do really applaud Stephen Moffat for not providing all the answers, as the episode allows Doctor Who to push boundaries as opposed to adhering to conventional storytelling. This feels like the ultimate Stephen Moffat villain, a creature so abstract even the viewer can't see it. It's rooted in every person's childhood. It's just following its own nature and is rooted deeply in primal fears. But at the end, the episode is a wonderful analysis of how fear can be a superpower and a constant companion of us all. Even at the last man standing at the end of the universe, we can never outrun fear. It's always been there. Listen remains one of my favourite episodes for being such a constant companion to me since it aired 10 years ago. Number 34. The Demons. This is the quintessential Jon Pertwee story, as it has the whole package. The whole thing has a terrific, enchanting atmosphere, and the fact that most of it is shot on location adds to the whole feel. With a story featuring action set pieces with helicopters, motorbikes, and fistfights, this is a textbook Barry Letts Jon Pertwee serial. The concept is a pleasing mixture of traditional folk magic explained by more logical science, one in which aliens are, of course, normal, if you want to go that far. It maybe doesn't fully work in its scientific explanations over the black magic, but that's probably for the better, as it doesn't spoil too much of the ambiguity or atmosphere. Roger Delgado is as marvellous as ever as the Master, and the whole Master shoehorned into every story in Season 8 was starting to feel a bit strained, but he's still terrific in this performance, and feels even more menacing in The Guide of a Vicar, and the story does offer a closure to his Series 8 story arc when he's finally captured at the end of it all. The titular demons themselves aren't represented as beings of pure evil, but more amoral, with an inclination towards actions and deeds on their own terms, with the goal of experiments and knowledge as their ultimate end. This premise is what primarily drives the resulting storyline as the Earth is put in danger of conquest and potential destruction from a seemingly almighty power, and the plot starts out strong right from the word go. rapidly turning into a dark siege situation that only gets more intense the further it goes on. The stakes are appropriately high, but not so high as to jeopardize the believability of the situation, and the ultimate result is a great combination of serious drama and enjoyable sci-fi that balance each other out beautifully and tie in nicely to themes of science versus spirituality that the adventure plays with. It's a thrilling and engaging tale that revels in the setting and gothic folklore of 1970s British horror. It thrives on a spooky atmosphere and a chilling premise that's backed up wonderfully with a great sense of humour and outstanding performances all around. John Pertwee's Doctor and Roger Delgado's Master, they both utterly thrive in this adventure, and Unit itself gets some very unique chances to shine in conflict with a force that's more laced with magic and superstition than outright sci-fi. It's easily one of the third Doctor's finest adventures. Number 33. The War Games. Did this need to be 10 episodes? No. But for Troughton's final story, we certainly ended this era on a high. The way this story stacks up its revelations and becomes more vast and epic as it progresses is pretty breathtaking. The war, the spooky glasses, the scanner, a second TARDIS, the mists, the Romans, the map of all the war zones, a control centre, one of the Doctor's own people, the Resistance, the Time Lords, the trial, the force regeneration. This is a beautifully crafted piece of work that is never short of surprises. The beautifully written and performed villains encourage you to keep watching, starting very effectively with General Smythe, and they just get better from there. The Security Chief, the War Chief, the Warlord, and finally the Time Lords, with each one feeling more powerful and more dangerous than the last, until you are gasping with delight at how high the stakes have become. You've got a massive and engaging cast of characters brought to life by some great actors, and enough locations to fill a season all artistically shot by the director. Right at the centre of this masterpiece, there's Patrick Troughton, Fraser Hines and Wendy Padbury, a great team, and they are all appropriately given their finest material in their last show together. Exciting, shocking, hilarious, dramatic, action-packed and reshaping the series forever, The War Games sees the Troughton era end as it began with a triumphant story. It's proof of what Patrick Troughton could do with the role of the Doctor. There is no finer story, and we are blessed that this epic survived the purge that was the archive wiping in the 60s. The War Games is 4 hours of pure bliss. Number 32. Horror of Fang Rock. The fact this was written at the last minute and it turned out this good makes me question whether writer Terrance Dicks was even human. This story absolutely kills it with the atmosphere. You could easily adapt this thing into a pure horror story, and it would work perfectly. It's tense and unsettling, and there's a pretty scary atmosphere throughout its 4 episodes. An old creaky lighthouse that's been isolated at night in the middle of a terrible storm. This is the perfect setting for a horror movie, and the fact we have an unseen creature slowly going through the characters and killing them off just adds to the atmosphere. You never quite know who's going to be killed off next, and there's a real sense of danger as the stakes feel incredibly high. The way the Rutan attacks is very unsettling, with the powerful electric shock brutally stopping anyone it comes across. All 3 lighthouse keepers are good. Ruben, Ben and Vince have a great dynamic which feels real and natural. There's this sense of camaraderie and understanding between them, even when they're criticising one another. Yeah, they may argue and bicker, but it's always friendly and entertaining, and you can see their friendship shine through in some really great moments. It applies to the rest of the cast. Every death that we see feels like such a waste. No one feels like a obvious red shirt here. The Doctor and Leela are also fantastic in this story. Both Tom Baker and Louise Jameson are giving fantastic performances, and their chemistry is just electric. The way they bounce off each other is brilliant, and they manage to be really funny together. Their personalities clash perfectly, yet they still feel like real friends who are constantly learning from each other. I like how Leela clashes with all the other characters because of her background. She's a warrior from a tribe, and this means she's got absolutely no idea about human social cues, which is very funny to watch, and it does lead to some many great moments. She also has real moments of wisdom and intelligence, which offsets this perfectly, and there's her typical cunning and bravery on full display. The Doctor is also fantastic in this story. Seeing him investigate and slowly deducing what's going on is brilliant. He's piecing information together, and over the course of the story, he starts to understand what's going on, which is just great to watch. This episode nailed the gothic horror vibe with its claustrophobic, spooky setting and a tense, unsettling atmosphere. There's a real sense of danger and fear that exudes from the Rutan, who acts as an interesting, unique new alien. Both the main and supporting cast are incredible, and there's plenty of wonderful moments in this perfectly paced story. Horror of Fang Rock is a delight from start to finish. Number 31. Terror of the Zygons. Combining the Earthbound formula with the gothic horror vibes mid-70s Who was known for, and you've got a recipe for a classic. The Highland mystique, as popular consensus holds, is gorgeous and just oozing with charm, from a string of wonderfully characterised and performed roles to the superb set design. Douglas Camfield, the director, not only tells so much through the camera, but the use of film and video appears seamless whilst the entire piece paces along at a superb pace. The Zygons are a unique creation, and it astonishes me that it took as long as it did for them to make a return appearance. Such attention to detail is evident here, the veins threading through their skin, the segmented face, the fluid glistening on the flesh, the suckers that spread the length of their body. Not only is the design superb, but the direction adds so much to their effect. The whispering voices in particular going around is what you might expect from a creature this grotesque. The icing on the cake is the fact that they can steal your identity and infiltrate your life. It's especially chilling and used to menacing effect throughout the story. You don't know who you can trust when anyone could be a Zygon replica. Terror of the Zygons kicks off the 13th Doctor Who season perfectly, and proves that this was going to be no unlucky year for Doctor Who. C. Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead. The new series can fall into a trap of stuffing too much into either 45 or 90 minutes, but Stephen Moffat more than pulls it off with a script that is full of surprises. The first episode is the perfect scene setter. It's packed full of mysteries, introducing us to all the main characters, brewing a stifling atmosphere, and relishing in some terrifying notions. And with the advent of Donna's death in the concluding part, Episode 1 is just one knockout scene after another as the narrative insatiably unravels, and the surprises just keep on coming. When you look at what Stephen Moffat is juggling, such as a library planet, killer shadows, a virtual reality love story, the Doctor and Donna facing their own futures, the fairy tale adventures of a dying child, this is a remarkably packed script that brings all of these elements together for an unforgettable conclusion. At the same time, Stephen Moffat throws in ideas like ghosting, the nodes, walking skeletons, while still having time to make some intelligent comments on the conventions of television. Director Uros Lin gives his usual panache to each story, but when he's handed a script this dense, he rises even further to the occasion, packing the story with unforgettable imagery, a terrific pace, and some spine-tingling performance pieces. David Tennant, Catherine Tate, and Alex Kingston are brilliant here, and the remaining guest cast provide excellent support. This two-parter makes the top 50 for a very good reason. Number 29. The Waters of Mars. By far the best of the 2009 specials, The Waters of Mars is an absolutely superb horror story about a waterborne virus discovered on Mars. However, it's also a great exploration of the 10th Doctor's character and his mental state at this point in his life. One thing I particularly like about this story is that it feels like a historical event, yet it's set in what is our future. The Doctor knows what history says happened here, and the news articles scattered throughout really help this to feel like a historical event that we just haven't gotten to yet. Lindsay Duncan is fantastic as Adelaide Brooke, one of the best one-off companions ever. Her character development across the story is magnificent, and the way she calls the Doctor out at the end is one of the highlights of the entire 10th Doctor era. The scene where the Doctor declares that the laws of time are his is an extremely powerful one and just magnificently performed by David Tennant. You can really feel the 10th Doctor's anger and determination through the performance, and how much this victory means to him at this point in his life. The Doctor is actually pretty scary here with the way he disregards his own rules and seems like he's about to take the laws of time into his own hands until Adelaide snaps him out of it in the most brutal fashion possible. The final scene where Adelaide chooses to kill herself to preserve history is a really heavy moment and a real gut punch to finish the episode on. Combining your bog standard Base Under Siege story with a fixed point in history and the 10th Doctor at his breaking point, and you have one of the finest Doctor Who stories ever made. Number 28. The Seeds of Doom. One of those rare six-parters that never stumbles or drags, and is one of the series' most accomplished dramas. Tom Baker and Elizabeth Sladen seem to be really enjoying themselves with this story, throwing themselves into the moments of comedy, of drama, and indeed of horror with equal gusto. Director Douglas Camfield sticks to many of his tried and trusted repertoire of actors, and his familiarity with the guest cast talent really shows here. The probable highlight of the guest cast is Tony Beckley as the head villain of the piece, Harrison Chase, a twisted millionaire who champions plant life over that of human life. Beckley gives a well-tuned performance as the maniacal Chase, blending an understated calmness with a far more sinister side, and just the right level of enough, but not too much pantomime villainy. John Challis as Scorby goes under terrific character development, starting off as hired muscle, but when his own life is threatened, he helps defeat the Krynoid. But he doesn't instantly become a good person. His allegiances naturally change, but not his character or personality, and it feels fantastic to watch. The Krynoid is an equally terrifying monster, as the way it possesses humans and changes them is haunting, and the way it grows bigger and bigger is well realised and naturally raises the stakes. The Seeds of Doom is a wonderful adventure from start to finish. Number 27, The Girl Who Waited. Easily the best episode of Series 6 and Karen Gillan's finest hour as Amy Pond, The Girl Who Waited. A great look at companions and an unexpected long-term consequence of travelling with the Doctor. The idea of a companion waiting years for the Doctor has been used before. Amy herself was already known as the said Girl Who Waited. We've also had returns of classic companions who have resentment of the Doctor to some degree, but this is different. Amy has had to adapt and overcome this hostile environment all by herself, living in isolation in a soulless facility for such a long time. Rory also has to deal with the fact that his young, lively wife has aged immediately into a bitter woman twice his age who now cares for nothing. The dilemma of which Amy deserves to be saved is a no-brainer in my opinion, but Rory's agony over how to proceed is very understandable. He has to decide whether to kill his wife despite her being the original version, or letting a version of his wife he lost that same day die, and saving a woman in her late 50s, early 60s to be his wife, who he will outlive by decades. This is a solid highlight of the 11th Doctor era, a small cast and a relatively Doctor-light episode with emotions in every scene, a look at how Amy might feel one day after she's left the Doctor, if it happened a certain way. We also see an antagonistic version of the Doctor. Performances and music are all done to brilliant standard as well. Overall, The Girl Who Waited is a terrific analysis of the companion role, and rightfully stands as one of my favourites. Number 26, Human Nature and the Family of Blood. Breathtakingly good throughout, there isn't one part of this story that isn't firing on all cylinders. Over the course of 2 episodes, we experience a charming and ultimately heartbreaking love story, an affirmation of Martha's love for the Doctor, a tear-jerking character study of John Smith, an exciting action adventure, some fantastic scares and a touching commentary on the First World War. The production values are nothing short of amazing, with director Charles Palmer proving a standout director, and his handling of the script material is first rate, pushing the actors to their limit and giving them plenty of room to express their talent, but also providing striking set pieces and splendid location work. Whether it is moments of romance or terror, the tone of the piece is absolutely convincing, and helped immeasurably by one of Murray Gold's finest musical scores. Showcasing the talents of David Tennant, Jessica Hines, Freema Agyeman and Harry Lloyd, it is one of the finest acted stories, with the central romance in particular proving a masterpiece of character drama and a visceral, emotional experience. Number 25, The Ark in Space. Russell T Davies's and Stephen Moffat's favourite story for a very good reason. The Ark in Space is a prime example of everything coming together to create something truly special. The writer, actor, designer and musician are all working overtime to ensure that The Ark in Space is an epic yet claustrophobic sci-fi chiller that really gets under your skin. The Ark itself is a magnificent setting, brought to life with rare vision by Roger Murray Leach, and proving the perfect pristine environment for this graphic tale of possession to take place and really make such an impact. Tom Baker is a revelation in only his second story, but saying that the material is so strong and instantly attuned to his more dangerous portrayal, it would have taken a poor actor to fail to make all this work. Elizabeth Sladen and Ian Marter provide fantastic support, and it's immediately obvious that this is going to be such a great team to watch. It's such a shame that it didn't last any longer than 6 stories together. The Wirren are one of the nastiest Doctor Who enemies ever conceived, a breed of insects that require human incubators to plant their eggs in to reproduce and tear free, the knowledge of their breeder having been stolen. We get to witness this process at every stage, and the appalled reactions of the cast do a lot of the work for us. As a script, Robert Holmes once again shows how it should be done. The Ark in Space is packed full of great ideas. It's gorgeously plotted and structured, gains momentum throughout, is full of drama and great lines, and has a solution that is sufficiently set up and satisfying. It's such a great piece of TV. A triumph of imagination, performance, design. This is a story that proves that it is necessary to push yourself to the limit, because sometimes you may be surprised at what you can pull off. Number 24, The Girl in the Fireplace. A love story across time and space, the overall effect of Fireplace is just dazzling. It's so alive with such inventiveness, so radiant in its confidence, and the execution, courtesy of director Eros Lin, results in one of the most attractive looking Doctor Who stories ever. Should Doctor Who attempt a love story? You might not think so, but the success of this episode is a good indicator of why RTD and Stephen Moffat have continued with the same approach countless times since. I love how Stephen Moffat slaps two incongruous elements together to really grab your attention. The fireplace on the spaceship, the horse trotting down the corridor illuminated by artificial lights, the beating heart wired into the spaceship, Ronette in a ball gown surrounded by rusty technology. Any one of these moments pushes the magic of the Doctor Who button. The juxtaposition of these elements is all extremely appealing. Our glimpse at ethereal Paris is typical of this episode's attention to detail. A literal monster under the bed. Stephen Moffat loves preying on those childhood fears. For being such a beautiful love story across time and space, The Girl in the Fireplace stands as Doctor Who tipping its toes into uncharted genres, but coming out on top. Number 23. Bad Wolf and the Parting of the Ways. A perfect way to end Series 1, this story mixtures the epic science fiction world of Doctor Who with Davis's enchanting domestic character-based vision for the programme to wonderful effect, and the 11 weeks of material that have come previously inform so much of what takes place here. No Doctor Who season has been structured this skillfully, and so much of that of the finale rewards because of it. The reality TV parodies work pretty well. The first episode is great, with appropriate build-up to the Dalek invasion that feels positively cinematic. The battle that takes place in the second episode puts the Daleks on a level of menace that is way anything we have seen before. Christopher Eccleston and Billie Piper have managed to bring the show back with such an explosive bang, and they saved their best performances for their last story together, and the Ninth Doctor and Rose are simply made for each other at this point. It's unique in Doctor Who's history to have a cliffhanger and a regeneration that feels so positive, and the ending promises great things for the future. This finale is nothing short of fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Number 22. Turn Left. Catherine Tate's finest hour as Donna Noble, the most important woman in the whole of creation. Turn Left proves how great Doctor Light stories can be, with Catherine Tate delivering a performance that, in my opinion, will go down in Doctor Who history as one of the best. Russell T Davies has written an impeccable script, and it is dramatically realised by director Graham Harper, giving us a deliciously dark waltz through the last 4 years of alien invasions, and showing us the consequences of them without the Doctor's help or interference. Jacqueline King and Bernard Cribbins provide the best support that Catherine Tate could ask for, propping up the episode with some weighty talent while still giving her the limelight. The world without the Doctor is a scary place, and the episode never shies away from how much we are in his debt. But the human race is a formidable force too, and Donna proves once and for all what an incredible person she is, suffering terrible tragedies, watching her world collapse, and then willing to make the ultimate sacrifice to put things right. I couldn't love Donna Noble more than I do in Turn Left. One of my favourite episodes for a good reason. Number 21. The Robots of Death. A masterpiece of suspense and horror, The Robots of Death is one of those classic Doctor Who stories that doesn't put a foot out of place. As a drama, it's expertly constructed, and the world in which the Doctor and Leela drop in on is packed full of detail to make it one of the most convincing future environments. The director and the cast all work wonderfully together to make exceptional TV. The design and effects are all perfectly in tune, and producer Philip Hinchcliffe overspends outrageously and makes this visually as stunning piece as possible. All of the sets are impressively designed and realised, from the multi-level bridge to the crew's quarters through to the corridors. There's been some real effort to make sure that this world which the Doctor and Leela step into looks real. Then you have the robot design, which in its opulent mockery of humanity adds a considerable amount to their malevolence. They mock the affluence of the wealthy and are the perfect representation of a machine for those who don't like to be reminded that they are automatons. The Robots of Death is a stunning story that is just shy of the top 20 for me, but do bear in mind I absolutely adore this story, so it's not that low when you think about it. Number 20. City of Death. The crowning achievement of the Graham Williams era, City of Death is stuffed full of magical moments you just want to watch over and over again to remind yourself why Doctor Who is such a special and unique series. It encompasses much, has many layers, is bred into the very fabric of human existence itself, and yet still manages to tell a hugely enjoyable adventure story in the process. The Jagaroth spaceship exploding that caused the birth of the human race, and the scattered Scaroth throughout time where he pushed the human race forwards to a point where they could help him go back in time and stop it all happening. It's so bogglingly audacious, but it's Doctor Who throwing the highest concepts in the air and shrugging as though it does this all the time. It takes brilliant ideas like the Doctor popping in for a chat with Leonardo da Vinci, the man drawing a picture of a time lady with the crack through the face to explain the time slip, 7 Mona Lisas hanging out in a basement, a ruthlessly inept detective who punches out everyone, the Doctor talks to but ultimately throws the punch that saves history, a suave and elegant bad guy who is involved with a multi-million-dollar heist to wipe out humanity, and best of all, the Doctor dodging traffic to hail a taxi, screaming out, "Is no one interested in history?" Ambitious, funny, atmospheric, perfectly performed, directed and scored Doctor Who. I don't think much more needs to be said. City of Death is as perfect as Doctor Who gets. Number 19. The Brain of Morbius. Pillars askew, candles flickering, cobwebs billowing, bubbling laboratory equipment, statues, fire crackling. The set design is a delicious love letter to Hammer horror, and it's just one of the many reasons why I love The Brain of Morbius so much. There are no lengths that this episode won't go to repulse and entertain. This is nasty, playful, imaginative, and very frightening in parts. The Brain of Morbius is the ultimate expression of the Robert Holmes, Philip Hinchcliffe gothic horror approach. Tom Baker and Elizabeth Sladen are on top form here. They both find the comedy, drama, and horror within the script, and deliver it with skill and confidence. Elizabeth Sladen has to play scenes where Sarah Jane can't see, and she doesn't oversell it. She's convincing in the different levels of fear she displays initially after hearing Solon's diagnosis, and when things start to get really scary, she also convinces in how she tries to feel a way through the space she's in, like a sighted person who can't see rather than like a blind person. Tom Baker is certainly enjoying himself too, particularly in the scenes with Cynthia Grenville or Philip Maddock. He balances the Fourth Doctor's flippancy and graveness throughout, and despite extensive rewrites and a restricted budget, The Brain of Morbius is a coherent, entertaining and well-realised story. It's one of the highlights of the era and well worth watching. 18. Blink. Sometimes the best episodes are the one where the Doctor barely appears in. The Weeping Angels are an incredible villain and utterly terrifying, and it's easy to see how they became so popular almost overnight, all with the help of how they are directed. We never see them move because we, the audience, can see them. The episode jettisons any real source of connection to the past by getting us to know and sympathise with a completely unknown cast of characters that aren't horrendously obnoxious or grating. David Tennant and Freema Agyeman do show up here and there and play a part in things going on, and their acting is great as usual, written with great energy and dialogue. But really, Carey Mulligan as Sally Sparrow is the absolute standout performance, as she should be given the nature of the adventure and what it's supposed to be. She's very relatable, charming, intelligent, and one of those characters who just draws you in with who she is and how she behaves in any given situation. Topped off with a terrific timey-wimey twist that made Moffat so famous and iconic, and you have a modern-day classic that is fantastic from start to finish. Number 17. Vincent and the Doctor. This historical story has true sophistication in my opinion, and the ending to this day still gets me in a good way. It's brilliant that an episode with such gorgeous character drama, and one that studies schizophrenia with such sensitivity, still has time for a giant invisible chicken roaming the streets of Paris. Visually, it's one of my all-time favourite Doctor Who stories. Every frame has been exquisitely lit and designed to provide a feast for the eyes, and some of the imagery is appropriately as dazzling as a Van Gogh painting itself. Matt Smith and Karen Gillan give their best performances of the 5th series, and writer Richard Curtis treats the pair of them to some wonderful dialogue and interplay. But the star of the show is definitely Tony Curran, who takes a potentially unsympathetic role and creates a Vincent van Gogh who is entirely credible and great fun to be around, and before the episode he will have broken your heart by the end. The intimacy and chemistry between these 3 characters is extraordinary. Doctor Who is not the sort of show that discusses the effects of depression, and there is a very telling moment where the Doctor tries to and Vincent tells him to leave. The episode has already shown us some very powerful scenes that Vincent is unstable and doesn't need to push it that further in dissecting his apparent madness. The double twist of discovering that the Crephaeus is blind and then its accidental murder completely turns the simple plot on its head and guts the viewer emotionally, but it's all done in a very subtle manner that doesn't bash the sentiment over the viewer's head as some episodes can. Seeing the world through Vincent's eyes is sheer poetry, and is an amazing study of how mental illness affects us all even when we can't see it. Number 16. The Empty Child and the Doctor Dancers. Stephen Moffat's first proper contribution to the series, and oh boy is this a strong first impression. The highlight of the first season of New Who, this is a frightening tale which generates its scares through the performances, and the subtlest of effects and direction, a horror tale that understands the genre and allows the time to build up an atmosphere. As such, it's the most classic Who story yet, with an appropriately slower pace, a stirring location, freakish faceless monsters, and a Doctor-companion combo that positively twinkle. Stephen Moffat's first script is still one of his best, managing to tell a wartime story whilst avoiding all the cliches and a fine science fiction story at the same time, with plenty of gorgeous lines for everybody and some unexpected moments of poignancy. It's a beautifully realised piece as well, evocatively all shot at night and with some stylish touches that really makes this an under-the-duvet experience. John Barrowman joins the cast as Captain Jack Harkness, and he makes an instant impression, and by the end of the tale, the Doctor, Rose and Jack make for a blissful trio of regulars. All in all, this is one of the strongest Doctor Who stories you are likely to see. Just when you think it's going to end with a load of technobabble, the story hits you with the most emotional of revelations. Just this once, everybody lives. Number 15. Heaven Sent. Reeling from the death of Clara as a result of the misadventures of Trap Street, the Doctor is angry, lost and confused, ready to blame whoever brought him here for the loss of his best friend. And as he runs from the veil, he confesses something triggering, thus beginning his thinking out loud, which lasts all episode as he battles with this structure in search of answers. This is Capaldi's finest moment as the Doctor, and never before have we had a full story with almost just the Doctor in it. Heaven Sent is not only brave, it practically redefines what an episode of Doctor Who can be, and Stephen Moffat achieves that by smashing through the boundaries and changing the shape of the series into something entirely unique. Just for one astonishing episode, the presentation, the horror, the strength of performance, the poetry in the writing, the surprises, everything about this episode is adult in a way that the new series rarely dares to be. It's a bold move to show the Doctor this afraid and this menaced by his own personal demons, since he is our constant companion in the show, and he is the one that the children latch onto for comfort. Heaven Sent is amazingly breathtaking, and rightfully deserved the top spot in Doctor Who's magazine's recent poll for 60 years. Number 14. Remembrance of the Daleks. A confident, excellent story that more than lives up to its reputation. The script feels fresh and relevant, providing the production with a solid foundation. Whatever the budget was, it looks expensive, with a large amount of urban location work and extensive well-choreographed action sequences, as well as refreshed special effects. It also has quieter, darker moments that add a depth to the proceedings. The Doctor has more dramatic weight to his actions, and the Cartmel master plan is on full display here, making the Doctor the ultimate chess player, having set the victory before the game has even begun. Sophie Aldred's performance still has flashes of the slightly childish character we met in Dragonfire, but overall we are getting a more mature Ace. It helps that the script gives Ace more weighty material than had become the norm for most companions. The plot is complex with a lot of characters, but the script doesn't hit you over the head with such heavy exposition. Writer Ben Aranovich, script editor Andrew Cartmel and director Andrew Morgan all work together, producing a fast-paced 4-episode story with great cliffhangers. The message isn't subtle, but it's not heavy-handed either, and it remains pretty relevant to this day. There's a real social commentary in this episode about race and identity politics, and this was all the way back in the 1980s. You can call Doctor Who woke all you want nowadays, but it's always been there, and the production teams have never shied away from taking on hard-hitting topics. The Daleks also represent the iconography of fascism of the past, whereas the association of the 60s shows how the fascism of the future is far more insidious and can be easily hidden in plain sight. One does not need tanks driving down the street to inspire fear, one can do them from a building merchant now. It's almost as if the story is saying the Daleks have outlived their usefulness, which is quite iconic considering this story is their final appearance in the classic series, and the Doctor destroying Skara at the end seems to tie into this. Remembrance of the Daleks is pure class from start to finish, and is simply bombastic, an exciting thrill ride for 4 wonderful episodes. Number 13. Pyramids of Mars. This is what I think of when I think of peak Doctor Who. What could have been an unextraordinary runaround is elevated to the status of masterful classic by the genius of Robert Holmes, making for not only one of the all-time great Doctor Who stories, but in my opinion a perfect place to introduce newcomers to classic Doctor Who. What makes this story so great is its execution. The stakes feel really high. When the Doctor talks about Sutek's godlike power, you totally believe him. Confined to a chair for almost all of the runtime, so much of Sutek's power is instead communicated through his dialogue, delivered in the deep, proper and wonderfully threatening tone of Gabriel Woolf. Tom Baker's performance too is one of his best. He plays the Doctor in a much less jovial, light-hearted manner than usual. Instead, he is sombre, every line communicating the fear he feels, the possibility that this time he might not be able to save everyone. All the perfect pieces are aligned here. The gothic horror, Tom Baker's unconventional persona, a brilliant villain and a high amount of effort being put into the new production, more than ever thought possible. With a lot of adventures old and new, even the best ones are remembered for having two, or at most three exceptional things going for them. Pyramids of Mars has Sarah Jane wielding a rifle. That counts for at least 5 exceptional points alone in my opinion. Honestly, this is a story I never get tired of. There's always something to love about Pyramids of Mars. Number 12. The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. Okay, you know what? I'm going to take a bit of a break here. I'll see you guys in the top 10 list, and I'm going to let these people explain why the next 2 stories are their favourites. See you then.
The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. I could gush for hours about my love for this thing. It's completely bonkers, but also utterly terrifying. It captures so many of Doctor Who's eccentricities and idiosyncrasies into one story. It's got rapping ringmasters, creepy clowns, and punk werewolves. I mean, what could be cooler? It's a real distillation of everything that the McCoy era was doing in terms of evolving the show and taking it to a new level and making it feel really modern as of 1988. And every time I watch it, it gets better and better. It's so unique and just proud of its own aesthetic, and the fact that it even came together is a miracle at all, because it was a real lightning in a bottle stroke of luck that saved the production. So honestly, I could gush for hours about it, but it is absolutely one of my all-time favourite Doctor Who's.
Number 11. World Enough and Time and the Doctor Falls.
Hello, I'm Richard, and World Enough Time / The Doctor Falls, the Doctor Who Series 10 finale, is without a doubt one of my favourite Doctor Who stories, if not, the best one, my favourite. It has everything, and here I've got the complete history book for that story, and the artwork there from Lee Johnson. Lovely, lovely artwork, and just from that you can see, you've got your 12th Doctor, Peter Capaldi, fantastic, Bill and Nardole, 2 incarnations of the Master, our first on-screen multi-master story, the Cybermen, of course, and everything that is going on, with them, with the whole genesis of the Cybermen thing, returning to the body horror angle of them, and really playing into that with the whole aesthetic of the hospital and creepy corridors and the body horror and everything. Of course, the cliffhanger, I think, has to be the peak of this story, where you've got kind of 3-in-1 cliffhanger with, the reveal of the Cyberman and Mondas, with the reveal of, the John Sim Master, with the reveal that Bill has been converted into a Cyberman, and that final line from the Master, the genesis of the Cyberman. It's just fantastic stuff. A real modern classic. So many great moments. A fitting finale for the 12th Doctor. Absolutely, hands down. His speech in the second half in particular is just a fantastic, Doctor-defining moment. And seeing him there opposite these 2 masters. The whole thing with Missy as well, of course. That whole thread of, whether she's going to turn good or not, coming to a head. And, the genius way that is sort of personified, that kind of struggle within her. Between Missy and the old Master, bringing her back to the dark side, and of course her fate as well, literally stabbing herself in the back. Just perfect on so many levels. Yeah, like I say, a real modern classic, and a fitting finale for the 12th Doctor. How could you get a better episode of Doctor Who than this? I don't know.
Number 10. Inferno. Easily my favourite 3rd Doctor story. The more hardened atmosphere, the adult acting and political drama overtones are here in complete full force. From the very first time you see the title, you know you're in for something fiery. Inferno, Italian for hell. It's about a greedy plot to mine to the Earth's core for the naive pursuit of resources, which the Doctor has little tolerance for. The previous 2 stories saw UNIT confront corrupt organisations, with some kind of sci-fi twist to remind the viewer they're watching Doctor Who. What will Inferno do? Create a monster or go on a sci-fi journey? It's both, really. The Primords serve as conventional Doctor Who monsters, a grotesque transformation of the human race that turns them into werewolves. I love how there are different phases to it, how your hand turns green, you know your time is up. For a world they're going to douse in magma at the end, they went into meticulous detail crafting it, through exposition, acting, and even the harsher camera filter in episodes 2 to 6 make the whole planet feel warm and uncomfortable. The acting sells it though, it's wonderfully intense, especially when they get closer to the drill, and the drill gets closer to the core. Inferno masterfully builds tension up and up until the world ends, and is so delightfully dark and cold in tone that it easily makes my top 10 stories. Number 9. The Tomb of the Cybermen. I have to put my favourite Doctor in the top 10 most definitely. At a blissful 4 parts, the pace is relentless, and something memorable or gripping crops up every couple of minutes to keep you on your toes. The Tomb of the Cybermen looks really expensive, with great sets, moody lighting, and some simple but striking effects work. No, it isn't an intellectual treat, but sometimes Doctor Who has to step away from its roots as an intelligent drama, and produce something blockbusting, moody and heart-stopping. As a montage of iconic imagery, an exciting adventure story, a chance to see Patrick Troughton at his dazzling best, and the Cybermen at their most menacing, it is absolutely unmissable. There is something very disturbing about the embryonic Cybermen coming to life. It's one of Doctor Who's best ever set pieces because it is visually exciting and scary at the same time, and it promises more shocks to come. The Cybermen stalk towards the camera when they wake, as if to stare at the kids who are watching directly and really give them nightmares. The Tomb of the Cybermen is pure magic from start to finish, and is easily my favourite story from the 1960s. Number 8. Genesis of the Daleks. A story that lives up to its iconic status and even more so. Terry Nation's script is a work of art in of itself, an exercise in world building, character examination, moral dilemmas, and how to pace a 6-part action-adventure story with real momentum. The direction is bold, violent, and shocking. You wouldn't want Doctor Who to be this way every week, because it is just too disturbing in places, but as a fatalistic one-off piece, it is a tour de force. The lighting is superb, and Dudley Simpson's music has really come on since Tom Baker took over the role of the Doctor, highlighting the drama whilst cutting away at the melodrama as well. It's a huge cast, and nearly all the roles are impeccably performed, from sadistic to uncomfortably still, with Elizabeth Sladen and Ian Martin providing impeccable support to Tom Baker's Doctor, who has finally come into his own. The highest praise for the cast has to go to Michael Wisher as Davros, for creating such a memorable, grotesque character. There's no part of Genesis of the Daleks that isn't firing on all cylinders, and it's the first major success of many for incoming producer Philip Hinchcliffe. Even the conclusion is satisfying, managing to be both anticlimactic and loaded with irony and murderous relish. Every time I do watch Genesis of the Daleks, I am reminded of just how good Doctor Who can be, when everything comes together with absolute precision. Number 7. Midnight. Easily Russell T Davies's greatest script contribution to Doctor Who, Midnight has some of the best writing, the best direction, and the best acting that television has to offer. It really doesn't get much better than this. They are such simple ideas, but they're so effective, and that's why this episode is so chilling. Banging on the ceiling and walls, the darkness hiding nasties, the game of repeating phrases, the horror behind the eyes. Russell T Davies doesn't need a huge budget to frighten his audience, when the simple act of locking frightened people in a confined space and scaring them to death does the job better than practically any Doctor Who story. How the story shifts from horror of the entity to the horror of the passenger's reaction provoked a real sense of dread in me. Unknown aliens are frightening enough, but the unrestrained paranoia is a whole new level of psychological horror that the show rarely feels compelled to explore. This is the only story where the people that the Doctor is trying to save are so frightened and scared that they turn on him and try to kill him. Not people who are under any influence or possessed, they're just normal frightened people, and that's simply terrifying. It's the simplest of ideas, so effectively executed, and the most complex characterization. Midnight surprises you throughout and tightens its grip around your throat until you're gasping for air at the ending. I remember watching this as a 10-year-old and being so scared to death and blown away by its depth of characterization and scares. David Tennant is exceptional, and Leslie Sharp gives one of the scariest performances in the new series, but there isn't a weak link of the cast here, they're all fantastic. It is one of the few Doctor Who episodes that captures me in exactly the same way every time I watch it. It's astonishingly good TV, let alone a flawless Doctor Who episode. Number 6. The Deadly Assassin. Without a doubt the greatest master story ever made, Politics, world building, wit, and fright combine to make The Deadly Assassin not just another Doctor Who story, but a genuine event. It has one of the best first episodes in Doctor Who history, a mini-drama in its own right leading up to a foreshadow but unforgettable cliffhanger. The scrolling portent of doom that opens the story and reintroduces Gallifrey suggests this is going to be something a bit out of the ordinary for the programme. The Doctor, sweaty and terrified, assassinating the President is a superb teaser for the show, and entices the viewer to want to find out more about this act of terrorism. Peter Pratt's master is something totally unique, consumed by hate and completely psychotic, willing to bring the Time Lords down at any cost. The Matrix scenes in Part 3 are wonderfully terrifying and surreal, and you really feel like the Doctor is truly fighting for his life here. It's a gripping political thriller, and The Deadly Assassin will forever be special to me. Number 5. The Pandorica Opens and the Big Bang. My favourite story from the revived series, as it encompasses everything I love about Doctor Who. The script for this really does seem to have everything within the confines of its extended runtime, from a clever and creative premise that's far different from anything that's come before or even since, to the best example of Series 5's fairy tale vibe. Stephen Moffat allows for things to go massive in scale and energy, with so many memorable set pieces that still stand as some of the best of the era to this day, but it never forgets to remember the personal relationships at stake, and how things are all centred around Amy Pond and her connections to everything and everyone around her. All of this gives the narrative a sense of true epic wonder when the big moments do hit, combined with a sense of grounded drama, and it's easily the most balanced of all of the finales in terms of what it wants to do, despite the more complicated mechanics in the background. Moreover, this finale succeeds in making the universe feel bigger and more interconnected before, which future stories in the era would take and run with in more ways than one. While the story predictably has the Cybermen and the Daleks take more of the bigger scares in the serial, there are plenty of notable villain appearances in the titular alliance against the Doctor that we'd never really seen in the same place before. The narrative takes time to reconnect with many places and characters we've seen previously in the season, from Winston Churchill to Vincent van Gogh, all connected by the thread of the painting, which sends the story into overdrive before the opening credits even roll. It nicely emphasises just how much of an impact the Doctor has had on the universe by this point, and sets up several threads for his remaining 2 seasons, before the plot almost immediately grabs a tight hold of you and simply refuses to let go. From the ominously massive at Stonehenge, full of surprises that compromise the majority of Pandorica, to the crazy twists and trickery in Ledworth that Big Bang uses to exceptional effect, connected by the most devastating cliffhanger in the show's history, when things look like they're at their absolute worst, the whole story feels like a grand romantic payoff for everything built up in Series 5 so far, with the imagination of the writer and production team really exemplified in how things are executed. The ultimate idea behind the Pandorica and the setting it's contained in is a stroke of genius that really taps into the fantasy element the whole season has been going for at this point, while also selling the importance of stories and memories in gorgeous dialogue and how things are ultimately resolved once it becomes clear what has to be done to save the day. Delivering on romance, action, dialogue, and the performances, even though it can get lost in the excitement of what it wants to do, it's still a triumphantly exuberant story from beginning to end, and my personal choice as New Who's best story. Number 4. The Talons of Weng Chiang. Putting aside its distasteful depiction of Chinese people, this serial is just one quality scene after another, almost like eating the most delicious meal, and each bite is as good as the next one. Rarely have we been treated to such a luxurious story, one that takes the time to flesh out all of its characters, tell an atmospheric and gripping tale, and one that frequently dazzles with its colourful dialogue, and is wrapped up in a budget-bursting production that manages to make the smallest of scenes totally believable. Add to this mix the Doctor at the height of his powers, accompanied by a companion Leela who enriches the whole tale, a splendid Dudley Simpson score, and a fascinating and expensive look at the Victorian era, all told in 6 fantastic episodes that ensure nothing is rushed or underdeveloped. The Talons of Weng Chiang feels like producer Philip Hinchcliffe's perfect gift to Doctor Who, and perfectly encompasses everything that made his era so wonderful on the series. Number 3. The Caves of Androzani. Easily the greatest regeneration story for a Doctor, The Caves of Androzani perfectly ends the 5th Doctor's era in a lot of style. This features writer Robert Holmes' tightest script, with razor-sharp characters, a frantic pace, dialogue bristling with confidence, and a stunningly satisfying last episode. Director Graham Harper makes it his personal mission to make this story as stylish and dynamic as possible, and he kicks off his astonishing run of stories with blissfully high production values. The highest praise needs to go to Peter Davison though, and he takes hold of this awesome opportunity to show his audience everything he was capable of as an actor. He's astonishingly good. This has been touted as the best Doctor Who story of all time, and whilst there are a handful I would say are personal favourites, it is so good that I can certainly buy into its reputation. Another example of how blisteringly good 80s Doctor Who could be when it pulled out all the stops. The Caves of Androzani is amazingly fantastic. Number 2. Revelation of the Daleks. Without a doubt my favourite Dalek story for how morbid, twisted and dark it is. It's a perverse, squalid world that fascinating characters inhabit, a setting that stretches far beyond the confines of Revelation of the Daleks, where the character pairings have so much more to say than the little they do when they converge at tranquil repose. Each double act feels expertly crafted and is impeccably cast, so much so that it feels like a world that is populated by characters that could even make their own series beyond the trip that the Doctor makes to this planet. It's the perfect world for the Doctor and Peri to visit, a Doctor-companion pairing that has always been a bit more larger than life, because for once they feel like the most normal characters in the show. The script and direction are so different from the norm in the mid-80s that they are worthy of great praise. Eric Saywood writes with absolute abandon, refusing to conform with the rules of telling a Doctor Who story, and producing one of his finest scripts as a result. Director Graham Harper packs every scene with visual interest, assembles a first-rate guest cast that gets to grip with their characters, and ensures that the whole piece is constantly moving, imaginatively realised, and thick with atmosphere. A lot of credit for that has to go to the set designers and the lighting supervisor. There is far much more creativity in those areas than was the norm during this period. I've watched Revelation of the Daleks countless times, and every time I watch it there is always something new that I spot. Such is the complexity of how this has been put together. It's rare for everything to come together quite this perfectly for a Doctor Who story, and even rarer for a story to achieve that and push the envelope quite as much as Revelation of the Daleks does. Number 1. Attack of the Cybermen. You may be surprised to see this as my favourite story, as it is often regarded as a cheap exercise in Cybermen continuity. However, the pace, energy, production and confidence this story has is why I love it so much. Colin Baker and Nicola Bryant encompass a much more tolerable relationship between the Sixth Doctor and Peri, with sarcastic banter between the two, but there's no doubt that they care for one another. The Cybermen are on top form as well, truly showing their strength as they crush hands and torture people with their own cyber strength. Major props has to go to the set design as well. The cyber bases have people being slowly but surely converted into Cybermen that flawlessly reminds the viewer of the flesh that lies beneath the metal. The story wonderfully ties previous Cybermen stories to add something new to their history with the inclusion of the alien Cryons. The Cybermen are desperate to survive no matter what the cost, and even if that means wiping out a native alien race, they will do it. Whilst Attack of the Cybermen gets criticised for having way too many continuity references, I think this is a story that works very well for the home media age. I had already seen the majority of these stories by the time I watched this serial, and I think works very well in this generation of repeats and streaming. What I love about Attack of the Cybermen is not only Matthew Robinson's stylish and imaginative direction, his pacing, action sequences and ingenious uses of camera are all great, but also despite a few bumpy moments the Cybermen feel like a vicious threat, and their conversion process is a genuinely chilling prospect. It's a great story for the Sixth Doctor because he gets to be heroic, violent, unpredictable, funny, and even questions his own prejudices. This isn't anyone else's favourite story as far as I'm aware, but it will forever be my favourite Doctor Who story of all time. And, wow, that is all from me. Those are my 50 favourite Doctor Who stories of all time. What are your favourite stories? Let me know in the comments below what you think. Big thanks to Lewis and Richard for contributing to this video and sharing their favourite stories. Be sure to check out their channels in the description below, and I'll see you next time for more videos. Goodbye.